Hey everybody, Shil Abraham here. I am joined by the Honorable former Representative Donna McLeod, joined by Tim Sullivan, and this is the Blue Zone Podcast, where we are flooding the zone with Democratic and left-leaning content. And shout out to Juan Estrada Law for offering us this space, and he is a great personal injury lawyer, and he is based out of Duluth, Georgia, and he was voted, Best of Gwinnett 2024.
What?
Right.
Awesome. Gwinnett is producing some good stuff, huh?
And Mr. Sullivan here, works for the firm, so.
Awesome. Yeah. We need the youngins to keep coming up.
We absolutely do. And that's the thing, what I wanted to know, Donna, is what was your story in Gwinnett and how did you get involved in Gwinnett politics?
So I've got to say, Senator Barack Obama actually transitioned me into Gwinnett County Democratic Party and politics in Gwinnett. So back in 2008, well, prior to that, I remember seeing this young guy come up, did his the DNC. He was at DNC in 2004, and he comes on stage and he does this speech, forever indebted into American history. It's not a blue state, it's not a red state, it's the United States of America. And then, of course, he brought his wife on his speech, and then he brought his wife and his two kids. And, of course, they're all grown up now. But when he brought them on, I said if he ever ran for president, I would be there on day one. And take that point in time, I was not a citizen in 2008. But I said if he did decide to run, I would. So at the time, I was dating somebody, and him and I kind of followed Senator Obama around for a while and even invited him to Georgia to come to a Black History Month program. He was a little occupied and busy after that speech, of course, but what happened is 2007, he announced that he's running for president, and I just said I made my promise, and I did. So I used to drive from Gwinnett County down to Atlanta. And in fact, the first time I went to the office down in Atlanta, there was only like 14 people in the office. 9 of them were from out of state, and only 5 of us from the state of Georgia. Because people forget that at that time, Hillary Clinton was the favorite to be, the former First Lady was the favorite to be the nomination, to get the nomination for the Democratic Party. And so we went out knocking on doors, and we got almost every door slammed in our face in African American community.
Really?
Yes. Most people forget that at the time he did not have the support of African Americans. And so a lot of them didn't believe that the country was ready to accept an African American man to be president. And so it was very daunting task. I went out with a white kid from Texas. And I remember saying to him, and for some reason it started snowing that day. And I said to him, do you want to go back to my car? Because I was a driver at the time. And he said, no, I'm doing this for Barack. It was an enormously emotional experience, something I can never repeat. I can't explain to people if you weren't there. To see people from so many different backgrounds and religion just coming together for this one person in the hopes that we would have hope back in the United States. So that's how I kind of got involved. In fact, one of the only civil rights leader at the time that would support the senator at the time, Barack Obama, was, I can see his face, I'll get back to his name, but he where John Lewis was supporting Hillary, he was not. Reverend Lowry. Okay. He was the only one. He would do our invocation when we went out canvassing, so he'd do the prayers. He's no longer here with us, but that's the experience I had. And those of us that were there, we didn't give up. We just kept focused. And so after the election was over, because there was so much into that election, it was hard to stop. Right. So that's how I ended up finding out that Gwinnett County had a Democratic Party, and that's how I joined it. Back then, I think the Democratic Party had about $200 in the bank, but we had a lot of energy and a lot of commitment to it. Most people don't know the only city that went blue in Gwinnett County in 2008 was Snellville. The entire county was red.
And I grew up in Snellville. I
Yeah.
moved here in 2004.
Yeah, it's the only one that went, the only city that went blue. And so every other city in Gwinnett County was red. So at the time, this was definitely a red county, and a lot of people didn't think that would ever change. What people don't know about the change is that a lot of farmers that own land here gave up their land to sell, and so developers bought it. And when the developers bought it, they decided that they're going to build subdivisions. You know what happens with subdivision? You need people to start moving in.
Right.
So they advertised across the U.S., and it brought in a different group of people. It was really through this process that we actually changed Gwinnett County, right? Because to fill these subdivision and for the developers to start making their money back, they didn't care where you came from, just as long as the dollars was green.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, Gwinnett County, as a result, changed demographically. So 2018 is when we started looking at the real change politically. But prior to that, I spent my time doing voter registration, registering over 30,000 people in Gwinnett County, taking the time to understand what process needed. I eventually became a citizen in 2012 for President Barack Obama's re-election because I wanted to vote for him. So I started my process to become a citizen back in January of 2012, but they did not give me my citizenship until 2012 November after the election.
Wow.
Yeah, so I never got a chance to vote for him, but I did register a whole lot of people. And also, during that process of getting there, I got involved in helping other candidates in Gwinnett County. As you know, 2012 to 2018, we started putting people on the ballot. Prior to that, we weren't putting people against the Republican candidate. So a lot of people still believed it was a red county only because we weren't exercising and seeing the demographic change. The minute we started putting people on, we could start seeing the demographic change. In fact, I eventually ran for office thanks to Dewey McLean because he was the one that convinced me to run. It wasn't that I wasn't thinking of maybe running someday, but I'd only been a citizen 4 years by 2016. So I hadn't been very long, so I didn't really want to put myself in that place to run, and people think that, oh, she's pretty ambitious, huh? Because I wasn't, and not ambitious in that way, but I had several people call me, asking me. In fact, Gabe Okoye, who was a chairman at the time, he asked me if I would do it, and I told him no, and then Dewey called me, and the reason why I did it for him was because he's always showing up for the people that, that were trying to run for office. And so I ran in 2016 for the first time. But prior to that, the district that I ran in, 105, it was just created in 2010 after the census year, because the demographic had changed so much and the population in Gwinnett had changed. Mm-hmm. So they needed to create another district, and 105 was created in 2010 after the census. And the first time it ran an opponent, and a Democratic and a Republican in that race was 2012. The Democrat did lose, but I had supported her. She ran again in 2014. She lost again. It was getting closer and closer. The Republicans realized that in the House of Representatives. So what did they do? They gerrymandered the district in an off census year, right? It wasn't census related. It was definitely politically related. So, and I end up being on a lawsuit for that reason with the Lawyers Committee against Gwinnett County, against the state of Georgia, because we wanted to diversify the school board as well as the commission board, and as well as 105 that was gerrymandered. As a part of my activism in this county, I used to go to all the Board of Elections meeting. We fought for Sunday voting, fought for making sure signage was clear at a voting location. Those little things that people take for granted now was not something that was there prior to our activism. I will give credit to also to Councilwoman Marlene Taylor Crawford and Penny Poole. The three of us consistently pushed forward for that stuff. So we were constantly doing this. So when I put my name on the ballot in 2016, I lost by 222 votes. I was supposed to lose by over 2,100 votes because they had gerrymandered the district, but they had not realized how fast the demographic has been changing. And in 2017, instead of waiting for 2018, the team and I, about 5 members of the team and I that ran in 2016, we decided to go out and knock the 2,100 people that did not vote in the Democratic, 2,100 Democrats that did not vote in the election of 2016 for whatever reason. There was a lot going on with Trump and the First Lady Hillary, and a lot of people just sat out. A lot of Democrats sat out, and when you sit out, you actually cause more anxiety and more problems in our republic and our representative democracy. And so, when I did go out, we knocked on all 2,100 doors over the year of 2017. So we used to go to work, come back in the evening, and start knocking doors. Off year. And what I did was we created a walk card that said, "Thank you for your vote." We knew they didn't vote. And we stressed that I lost by 222 votes, but my plan is to be back on the ballot in 2018. So please come out and vote, right? 2018 comes and I win by over 4,000 votes, right? At that time, my instruction at the time was to just flip a Republican seat to a Democratic seat. That was the instruction, and it happened. But at the same time, I got a call saying, "Do you know you're the first Jamaican-born and Caribbean woman to serve in the Georgia House?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that. I was just told to basically flip the seat from Republican to Democrat." And I also happened to have been the first African-American woman to serve in that seat as well. So I kind of checked several boxes, but the fact that I was the first Jamaican and Caribbean person, that made bigger headlines.
Yeah, I mean, we have some great people in Gwinnett. Dewey McLean, who recommended you. He's going to be on the show next week. He's been around a long time, since the Vietnam War era when he turned 18. We have a lot of people who built up the Gwinnett County Democratic Party,
yes.
You included.
Yes.
And in many ways, people like myself and Tim, who are young Democrats, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're really continuing the work that people like you and Dewey have, really laid the foundation for. And that's a big responsibility. But we, because of that work, we're reliably like 60% roughly Democrat in Gwinnett.
Oh yeah, and it's clear. This past election made it clear because they maximized their turnout and could not still carry Gwinnett. So it's literally clear now that this is a Democratic county. It's not how we make sure the leadership that we select or not select, elect, that we put people in place that really are going to serve the people that they're elected to serve.
Yeah, what do you think the next generation is going to look like? What kind of leadership do we need to take Gwinnett to the next level and Georgia to the next level?
I think it's important for the next generation to understand the purpose of a republic. So many people think it's just about winning and getting a title. There is an actual method to the madness, right? So let's look at historically, right? This country was not built with everybody in mind. No. That's why there's 27 amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution was written by white males who own land. And their main goal was to keep England from interfering in the business of this new colony, right?
Right.
They no longer want that's so let me be clear, July 4th, 1776 was the independence of the colonized Britain colony of what we call now the United States, and the separation from Britain. That was the war that happened in the 1700s, 1774 it started, something like that, 73. And in 1776, the Declaration of Independence comes, right? And at that point, poor white men are not playing any big role. Right. They are peasants. They don't have anything.
They didn't have any land.
Nothing. So, And then you lead to a group of human beings who were once here, the native human beings that were here, who now were shown to be somewhat like cannibals. No, they're defending their land. This is the way they live. You want to make them sound like they're the people that are bad. So let's keep that in mind when we're talking about this country. And then, of course, the human beings that were brought here in shackles and chains and enslaved, right? And at that time, they weren't a consideration. They weren't even considered human beings. In fact, when they counted them as property, they were 3/5. Right. So for every 5 person that was black, only 3 of them was literally counted. The other 2 is like they didn't even matter. And so let's remember that as a historical fact. But it also, the Constitution is also a very good guide into governance, right? Into making sure that we the people, because the whole idea was, I don't want England interfering in my life, so I want to make sure that we over here, the people, have their own ability, and taxation without representation was something they were not going to have anymore. So again, there you have a country formed based on an idea that I don't want interference.
Right.
Young people have got to understand the concept of that idea, right? But remember that there was exclusion at that time. There was exclusion.
I mean, would we blame that on our civic education in public schools or just our community? I mean, I think when I look at a lot of young people, myself included, we did take like a semester of civics government, in high school. But frankly, it takes probably years of repetition and, thought behind, getting people civically engaged. It wasn't until I decided in my mid-20s to get more politically active that I learned everything I know about politics now. And I think we're doing our average citizen a disservice by keeping them so, ill-informed about the political process.
But it's intentional, right?
Right.
Knowledge is power. And the vote is the most powerful thing we give to each other. In fact, I coined that statement years ago when I started my nonprofit organization called CANI, Community Action Network Initiative, when I found that people were so ignorant about civics and civic engagement and didn't understand how it kind of worked. And I tried to my best, because I've done so much studying on this, and because I had to become a citizen of this country, I try not to break things down to make things understandable to people that might not. Everybody tends to want to categorize everything into what they call politics. Politics is just the one process. It's the process in which you endeavor to tell people that you want to serve and be their voice why they should pick you over somebody else. That's politics, persuasion. Right. We're doing the persuasion work. But once you're elected, you're into governance. The problem is everybody keep bringing politics into governance, and we're not governing on the best behalf of the people that we're serving. And that's what, if I was going to tell young people anything, please understand the role you take on when you run for office. It's not in service of yourself. It's in service of the people that entrust you to be their voice and in use of their money. Because taxation without representation caused a war before. Right. And so when the money is being collected, your money, the money that comes off your paycheck is real money that is going to be used. You need to make sure that you hold the people accountable that you've elected. Your job is not done when you elect somebody. Your job has only begun. And what has happened is so many people do not hold the elected officials accountable. They just let them run shot. And the fact is, there's a gap. And whenever there is any gap in anything, something tries to fill it. And it's usually somebody with money.
Yeah, and the other thing is, now that, Trump is president again, a lot of people are angry. And justifiably so. But the thing is, Republicans are avoiding town halls after they've done a few and there has been negative feedback. At this point, they are not even attempting to represent their constituents, and they're hiding from them. And that can't be good for our republic. And frankly, it should have never gotten to this point, I think, for Trump to have gotten elected. I think, and this is a bit controversial, but I think the Democratic Party, if it had been stronger, we could have prevented Trump from winning again.
So let me sum up a couple of things. So this isn't the fact that he's gotten a second term is interesting enough in itself. But I think it's important for us to understand the mindset that got people this place. When you don't have that knowledge and you don't have that kind of, how should I say, thought pattern about your government and what it's for, you were easily captured by slogans and drop words here and, so the Democratic Party, I think in some ways need to ensure that they're operating separately from the Republican Party. We have too many things that are very similar to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And that is caused us because the people that are in this big tent is expecting not the status quo from what is ordinary political rhetoric. They want you to speak to them about this. I think the Democratic Party lost a lot of its messaging to its base. It wasn't speaking directly. It's great to have some entertainers. It's great to have that. But at the end of the day, you need to go and speak to your base. By the time June came around, my nephew, who was 24 at the time, already had 3 mailers from the Republican Party. And they were definitely distinctive mailers about what he should be thinking or what's causing him to have any kind of problem. And Hitler did the same thing, right? Targeted and said, this is your problem. And I think the Democrats weren't very agile enough to make sure their messaging was clear, because it was clear what was coming from the other side was just lies and propaganda. But if you allow lies and propaganda to fester, that's what happens.
Right.
Lies and fester and becomes the truth. We at least have to agree on a certain amount of truth. Right now, it doesn't seem and both of us are engineers.
Yeah.
And so engineers do not work on theory, right? We get theory and then we prove theory.
Right.
And so as engineers, we are very root cause driven. And so when someone comes to us and says, oh, this is so, we do not accept that, right? We're going to investigate more. That's not the case for for a lot of people, right? I'm not going to say majority, but a lot of people is that they don't do their own research. And I know for a fact, like the people that are around me, they come to me and ask me my opinion. A lot of people don't want to do their own homework, but if they have somebody that they can trust, they can believe it. And that goes both ways, right?
And that's also why we're here today, because we're here because you know exactly what you're talking about. And we need to raise public consciousness as a Democratic Party and get our community in Gwinnett, in Georgia, more educated on these issues.
Yes.
So that they are more informed and they're hearing from people who know these topics better than them. And the Democratic Party, in my opinion, did not have the same presence on podcasts and a lot of these YouTube shows, new media. No. And that cost us because the Republicans innovated enough to be on new media and to get on these podcasts like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and all these other podcasts. And the Democratic Party needed to do the same, but they missed some opportunities, I believe, especially with young people to do this.
They missed a lot of opportunities because if you're aware, I think Trump won by 124. I usually refer to him as felon, but okay, he won by about 124,000 votes, and about 760,000 Democrats didn't vote in the state of Georgia.
Right.
So again, you didn't give them enough messaging to get them out to the polls. And I saw it. And I actually alerted the party several times and said, we're not alerted. We're not getting the people that we need to get to the polls. Some of my daughter's friends are in their 30s. They were motivated to go. It's a good thing I'm my daughter's mama, because I wasn't having it. She going out to vote.
Right.
By any means necessary. But that's not the case for everybody, right? And if all this information is flooding into you and you can't disseminate what's true and what's false, just like the checks that was sent out, it was the Democrats that actually advocated for those checks.
Yep.
And he signed his name and took the credit. And what does Democrats do? Oh, it's okay. We did it and we help people. Yeah, sometimes you have to brag on yourself a little bit. Because if you don't brag on yourself, nobody will brag on you.
Right.
And so the Democrats have a responsibility to talk to their constituency, especially their base first. I say this with all respect to everybody that voted, but the 92% of black women that voted together, it's not because we're a monolith. We are not.
Right.
We got all kinds of black women. We got black women that are Christians, black women that are atheists, black women that are, believe in having kids, some that don't believe in having kids. But we did this because we believed in our humanity first, our families, our community, and faith wherever it is you want to put it. But we collectively said we put our humanity first, not because we all agreed, not because we all thought necessarily that VP Harris, which I think is an intelligent, wonderful woman, but it doesn't mean that all of us felt that way, but we all agreed compared to the alternative. There was not but they did this and no, there was a clear understanding. One is a felon and one is a prosecutor. I don't know which of, you can't get more opposition than that or different.
That's another problem we have, because I know Kurt Thompson, the current chair, said that, Democrats, they have to fall in love, whereas Republicans fall in line. And that's a dynamic that we have to kind of work on. As Democrats,
I agree.
People on the left generally, we need to have a reason to come out and vote. And the thing is, we have a ton of reasons, it's just we don't do it anyway. And I speak as a 31-year-old younger millennial, that a lot of millennials around my age do not vote. We are civically checked out.
I know.
That's a problem.
That showed up it showed up on the voting.
Yeah, I mean, I even tell people, what's the point of having voting rights if you ain't gonna flip and use them?
And let me say this, just to clarify for all the youngins, you do not have a right to vote. You have the ability to vote.
The privilege to vote.
Yes, because 2/3 of Congress can undo the 15th, the 19th, and I think it's the 26th Amendment.
Yes.
Yeah. So, don't use it. You don't lose it. But let me tell you, in this state, you might lose it too, because they will roll you off the voter roll quick, fast, and in a hurry. Mm-hmm. But you will definitely forfeit your ability to get out there and have your voice be heard. And too many people have died. African Americans, I was not born in the United States. I am a descendant of African slave, just like any of us that was dropped in ports. Some was dropped into South America, some in the islands, and then moved up to the United States. But African Americans have done enormous, we cannot repay them. All of us that come here as immigrants, I don't care which part of the world you come from, you owe an African American for the work they have put into this country. Also, white women owe so much to the suffrage movement that was very much joined by African American women. And still, we continue to give trust and faith in the system that has betrayed African Americans every day. And they still give faith to it. But for the young people, this is not a joke. It's not a title thing. Don't go in running for office to be a titled person. Earn your title, because you will get lots of title over your lifetime. Someday you'll be maybe a parent, somebody's husband, somebody's wife. You're going to get lots of titles. Somebody's mama, somebody's auntie, somebody's daughter. You're always going to be somebody's daughter or sis or son. You got titles. You ain't running for a title. You run to serve. You run to serve the people, because there's a lot at stake. And we as a society, it's funny, everybody's getting a civic lesson in real time and realizing just what government actually does. So your very safety, water safety, I mean, we're drinking water, but again, this has to pass some criteria. Water safety, air safety, all of those stuff. When I was a kid, I remember acid rain. You all never heard of it, but So literally, companies would make sulfuric or nitric acid. They just let it go through the atmosphere. The atmosphere. They just have an opening to let it go, because they don't want it in the plant, because it's probably going to kill their employees. But they'd let it out, and the raindrops would be filled with this acid.
Sulfuric, nitric.
And especially back in the late 70s, early 80s, most of the cars were made of actual metal. And it used to rust the cars and damage yards because of this acid rain used to come down. And that's when the EPA actually became to form and gave rules of what companies needed to do to operate these kind of companies. You can't just let it out into the atmosphere. You have to collect it back. And so those kind of things that people take for granted and not realizing how much, just like even with the school board, just what policies mean, right? In the state of Georgia, which when I was a state legislator, I fought very hard. I introduced legislation that I introduced based on the fact that they had already done a study that the QBE formula, the Quality Basic Education formula for Georgia, was outdated. The last time that formula was updated was 1985, before you guys were even born.
Right.
And it's still the formula being used to fund. And then you run around saying you fully funded public school. Technically, that is correct. But logically, it's ridiculous because 1985 level, we have different needs in Gwinnett County than what was needed in 1985. And so I introduced legislation to just do a pilot program to see how we can best change the formula. And because they were on this mission, slogans, they love slogans, we fully funded public school. Well, now we're looking at an administration talking about dismantling the Department of Education. So guess what we don't have in the budget in the state of Georgia that the federal government funds? Kids with special needs, Title I schools, that kids that might not have a lot of money to give them school lunch program. Yeah. And those are not in the budget. In my legislation, that was accounted for, but it's not accounted for. So now it's a situation where we're already underfunding the public school system. We've put money into the budget for private prisons. Our public dollars, at a tune of over $130 million, our public money is being used to fund private prisons. And that's okay. And so you're telling me, why is the school to prison pipeline viable? Yeah, because when you're not making sure our kids are educated so they can avoid prison,
right,
you're creating the pathway for prison.
And unfortunately, the Republican Party does not really acknowledge this. They don't really see it as an investment in human capital to make sure that every young child is fed and educated, because in the long term, they're going to be productive members of society. You know, it's wise to see the world through that lens, but I think they see the world through the lens of, more for myself and my family and less for everybody else. And there's no empathy, and that's sort of...
A lot of them see the world through supremacy. Supremacy, right? That this country belongs to white folks and only white folks should run this country, instead of seeing the lens through humanity. And like you said, our shared need to make sure all our families succeed, right? They don't see it that way. And we need to stop confusing this thing. We keep wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll do. Some of them have straight up come out and say, no, this is about making sure that we preserve.
Sure. Because
the fear of seeing people of color flourish, and we know this for a fact because we saw in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when African Americans did the Black Wall Street and they bombed it. So it wasn't because African Americans weren't pulling up their shoes by their bootstraps. They were saying, oh no, you look like you're going too far, so let's just get rid of that. So that's why history is so important. It's not about living in the past. It's about understanding the past so you don't repeat it in the future. Yeah. Because we do it oh so often as human beings.
And the thing is, a lot of the things we enjoy now that I enjoy, as my parents were immigrants, I was born here, but a lot of the rights and privileges I enjoy is because of, the suffrage movement, the, civil rights movement. I'm benefiting from all the hard work.
Yes.
Over 100 years of hard work.
Yes.
By, the African American community, the women's movement. And a lot of people take it for granted, but I don't take it for granted. There are not many Indian people coming into, Georgia politics. But when I showed up, the community that embraced me the quickest and the boldest was the African American Black community, because they understand the struggle. They know what it's like, and
We've always been that kind of people because we put our humanity first. It is irrelevant of your color, creed, or kind if we can't coexist. Irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, our time here is limited. We cannot take anything with us, and we get it. We understand that, and we understand that if you have people that are willing to fight and do the right thing and do the most good for the public good, we know that that's always the right side to be on. So irrelevant of that, that's where I think the most disappointment comes for us this November 5th in 2024, is because not for a moment did we think of ourselves, because some of us do very well. We don't have to worry about a thing. We got our money, we got our house, we got our car, we could say, but we didn't do that. And I think that hurts the most, is that when you do things for the right reason and you still being, villainized or being told to shut up, or, you're getting in my way, that hurts the most.
Yeah, it does. And I think over time, I know during the Civil Rights era, Martin Luther King, he was well known for, the civil rights aspect, but then he evolved over time to a more economic justice, social justice angle that a lot of media just no longer really covers. They just pigeonhole him as the civil rights guy.
But they do that with African American history, as if that's the epitome of our history. African history goes all the way back to Africa, in great civilizations and humankind growing out of Africa. But yes, they do tend to pigeonhole him into this "I have a dream" speech, and when they do that, they get to keep the narrative. That's why it's important. Anytime, if anybody who's getting into politics, always make sure you create your own narrative about yourself. I remember when I first ran, I still have a bit of a Jamaican accent, and I grew up in Canada. But at the end of the day, somebody said, and genuinely, he was really a person that cared a great deal for me, but he was wanting me to win, and he was worried that if I put my face on my flyers, it would not be good, because of course with a name like Donna McLeod, you can think that I might be white. And he said, don't put your face on it. And I said, I'm not going to run for office and not be truthful to everyone that's going to be voting for me. And that's why I made the decision to put my face on it. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to hide anything that I am, because this country is supposed to be a melting pot. It's supposed to be a country where when you come here, opportunities should lie, as long as you're willing to serve for the greater good for the United States. I have taken the oath to this country 3 times already. One, to become a citizen of the United States, and 2 more times when I was elected and reelected to the Georgia House of Representatives. So I have nothing but the utmost respect for a country that is willing to grow and change. Like I said, 27 amendments to the Constitution in order to get more people involved. But I will not hide who I am, because that is part of the reason why America is great in some ways, is the diversity that comes. And, I laughed today because all those DEI statements during the campaign, as if DEI was some kind of black thing. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what that means is that veterans are DEI, white women are DEI, people with special needs are DEI. The fact that if you are in a wheelchair and there's a ramp put in a place so you can roll up that ramp, that's DEI. That's making it convenient or more inclusive, so you can participate and come into a building that you might not have access to because it has steps. People don't think about the little things, but they're learning. They're learning. It's unfortunate because there are a lot of people hurting because other people are learning.
And I think, unfortunately, people, now that Trump is in office again, people are starting to hurt. And they're
Yeah,
starting
they're
to
hurting.
see, our institutions are falling apart. And, as the son of immigrants, I don't think that people that are natural born and have been here for generations really understand what makes this country so great. I think the average immigrant understands better than the people who've been here
Yes.
200 years what makes this
Yes.
country great, because the level of opportunity, if you go to India, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this, in many parts of India, the culture is whatever you're born into,
Just where you stay.
that's exactly where you die.
Yeah.
But in America, we have this idea universally that wherever you start is not where you end. You can climb through hard work, and the system will be there to ensure that the people who work hard will get ahead. We're not advocating for equality of outcome, as the Republicans say, but we are advocating that those who have talent and ability can rise and do well, better for themselves. And for the longest time, that was possible for in America. But I feel like it's the conservative project to undo a lot of that and just make it so that whoever already has everything keeps it, and then
Supremacy. And now they're going for oligarchy. So it's just the rich should basically use our money
Yes.
without our consent. What I don't understand is, how could you think that we should just say it's okay for you to just use up my money and I don't have nothing to say about it? And so that is why we have to be conscious about what we do going forward, right? It can't just be, I'm not going to put myself out there for a protest. No, because the minute I put my little black thing there, my little black body up there, then you're probably going to get tear gas. You're going to probably see a tanker rolling down the street, and then he's going to want to call martial law. No, the people that voted for him and now are being effective, I think are going to be the best voices to really say something about it, because they're the ones that didn't think they were ever going to be effective, because somehow they felt they were going to be separated, And I hear them quarrel about, Social Security. What did you think?
They thought they would be immune from the damage.
I laugh. It's amazing how folks are so into themselves and lack empathy. But when it's affecting them, then they want you to join. Nah, boo. I did my protesting on November 5th, 2024.
Right. And now that, people are feeling it and it is affecting them personally, they're going to have to reconsider the Republican Party, and they're already starting to. But I think the Democratic Party, in the meantime, we are going to have to rebuild better. We're going to have to get focused on our messaging, and we're going to have to make a big comeback by 2026.
We can't be the lesser party of Republicans. We've got to be the Democratic Party.
Right.
We've got to stand for something. So African Americans switched parties back in the 60s from the Republican Party, which is the party of Lincoln, to the Democratic Party when they saw Kennedy. Kennedy was actually the big shift.
Okay.
Right? And I think when I look at that whole process, it's not a party issue. Parties are there for their platform and their policies. We will go to wherever the policies best benefit me, my family, my community. So it's not a party per se, because you can switch party any day. But when you take on the mantle of being a Big Ten party, you can't at one end be a Big Ten party, but only want the numbers. But then you kind of act the same way as the party that we're saying we're rejecting. It can't be like that. You cannot take on the same, the posture, and there's so much money in politics, and buying seats is not good representation for the people. It's just not. You're going to miss the republic. The republic is that the people are the ultimate power.
Right.
That's what a republic is. And we do the voting part so we could get representative democracy with this republic. This constitutional democracy requires our participation. If we don't participate, it will not work. And when so many millions of people did not vote in 2024, you forfeited the republic.
Yep.
And now the republic might be at stake.
I think so. And I think that's my message to young people, that a lot of them probably felt before they had nothing to fight for. Well, in less than a year, they certainly will.
Yeah.
And I know my entry to politics, it was, I was in my mid-20s. I was trying to work hard, but not getting as far as I thought I would. And I was starting to feel depressed and less optimistic about my future. But then my wife was like, you're an optimistic person. You shouldn't be depressed. But then I was like, well, I have good reason to not feel optimistic. And if I could either sit here, just in self-pity, or I can be part of the solution. And that's what I want more young people to do. I want them to decide to be part of that solution.
Yeah.
And no longer just sit in nihilism, thinking that this is the future that they're being handed and they have no influence. They have a ton of influence. They need to get up and vote and fight for what they need in life.
And Shelley, I've been impressed with you, and that's why I'm honored to be your first guest. It's always great to land somebody with the kind of experience. But because you are young people, and because the future is really up to you now, we set a lot of things in place, some great, some harmful. But we weren't intentional. Like, my generation wasn't intentional. I'm a baby boomer's child. But it wasn't intentional to make it harmful. But, anytime you put anything out there, someone can twist it, somebody can take it and make it not good. But I hope that you young people will at least see the errors of our ways and help correct it, because it's always incumbent on the next generation as to set the tone as what the next generation, the other generation after, will be. It's not easy because you're human and you're not perfect. And so you will make mistakes. I just hope that the mistakes aren't so detrimental that we can't revive it. And I tell people, laws are the opinion of somebody who sits at the table. So at the end of the day, you want people with good opinions of themselves and their community and the people they're going to serve to make good legislation on your behalf. Because at one time in the state of Georgia, it was perfectly legal to own a human being as a slave. That was the law. If you were found trying to, free a human being, you would be breaking laws. So I hope that people understand just the basic, and I try to give examples so that people can connect as quick as possible, because civics is not an easy subject, right? How do you explain, how do you keep being engaged in your community, trying to do the right thing? That's an inner thing, right? And you always have to motivate people to bring out their inner thing, because there are people that are naturally born with certain gifts, absolutely. But then there are people that, you have to kind of bring along with you. And I hope that anyone that steps in the road of leadership, do not let somebody go in vain. Do not cause them to cause harm to others or themselves. Being given the ability to lead is not a badge of like, oh, I'm a boss. No, it is, I have the fortitude, and if I have that fortitude and I can have some people willing to come along with me, then I should use it wisely, right? Because leadership is one of the things that some people have an innate ability to do things without being prompted to do it. But a lot of leadership is also learned, right? And experienced. I remember when I was 27 years old when I became a manager in corporate America. And I actually had 14 men reporting to me. 11 of them were men who practiced Islam. And I had to earn their respect. Anything that they were willing to do, I was willing to do it too. So I earned that respect. And the first time you make a decision and tell somebody to do what you ask them to do, you sit there and wonder, oh Lord, I hope I ain't said something wrong, and then they mess up. And then when it works out, that's when you start building confidence in saying, hey, when I give a direction, I might be able to do this and not really mess anybody up. And as time goes by, you give them more and more instruction, and then it gets executed. You get more confident. It's not like, woo, I came to the table, I'm a leader right away. It doesn't work like that. most of that, especially when you're dealing with people, and I told my daughter this when she was finishing college. I said, the hardest part of your journey now is dealing with people, because they can bring you some way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about leadership and what I've learned throughout my 20s, because I'm a very different person than I was in my early 20s. You know, confidence was not a natural thing to me. I had to earn it by getting good at things. Some
Yes.
people are just confident. You know, they're not always good at things, but
they're confident though.
but they're confident, and they're built for politics. But we do, I think, need to build a set of people who are competent and have built confidence and enter politics because they're competent. Because, you know, the solution, we have real problems in this country and in this state, and it's not going to be, you know, solved by people who don't know, you know, the solution. You know, we can all pretend to have a solution and just talk about it confidently like Donald Trump does, but that's not going to do anybody any good.
Yeah, and his confidence is based on an ideology of reality TV. I think he literally operates in episodes.
Yes.
I know I'm tired of being in this show. Yeah, I watch him, like even when he was talking to the Ukrainian president, and he said this should make for good when they went at the back and forth.
Right.
And then he says at the end, this should make for good TV. Are you serious? There are people dying.
He actually said that?
He actually said that. This should make for good TV.
How does that even come to mind? Like you're literally trying to stop a war in this other guy's country that's not even under our jurisdiction. Like this war ending this war was one of the reasons you got elected. So do that very thing. Don't focus on publicity.
Yeah, he said that. I just stood there like, it's surreal, and there was no anything made of it. There was nobody saying, did you just say this, dude? Because this man is in this country, you know, trying to, if you get an end to the war and get assistance to do that, and you're saying to him, this should make for good television. And I felt this way from he was elected the first time. Like it's almost as if he creates different scenarios in his head to keep the public distracted from the reality of life. Reality show is not real. It's usually scripted. And the reality of life is that people have to feed themselves. They have to keep a roof over their head. And he's out there thinking, this a dude that his daddy left him like something like 14 or 15 or maybe even 30 million. I don't know, many millions of dollars. And he thinks that he had a hard start.
And that is not a hard start.
No. Yeah.
You said 14 million?
I don't know if you can Google that. It was millions. The daddy left him millions of dollars. And every time that he got in trouble, his dad would bail him out.
Yes.
How many of us get even $3,000 to start or any money to start their lives? And he thinks that that was nothing, was chump change. Mm-hmm. But that's the mentality we're dealing with. This is the person that sits up there. He cannot have empathy for people who don't come from that background because he doesn't understand it. He can't empathize.
But, you know, poor Americans have it in their mind that this billionaire who's never was born with a platinum spoon in his mouth thinks about them and their future.
Yeah.
And I think he's proving already that he only serves the billionaire class. You know, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I've seen a homeless guy support Trump, and I'm sitting there wondering why. Like I didn't ask him that.
I guess he thinks one day he's going to be like him. I don't know what.
Yeah,
I really don't understand.
I've seen people think that mentality, but only in a cartoon. I didn't actually think that would happen in real life.
There are real people.
I remember seeing this episode of Futurama, and this guy's cheering like just for policies against the poor, and then he says, why are you cheering? You're not rich. And he says, true, but someday I might be rich, and when that day comes, people like me better watch where they step. Right. And I'm sitting there wondering,
wow,
how do people even? I hope this isn't actually a thing in real life. But
so
apparently it is.
I recently heard something that that makes you want to think, right? Things that make you say, so one person said, in order for us to have a capitalist society, it requires slave labor or mediocre, or where you pay people less, right? Because capitalism requires profit. That's the difference between government and capitalism, right? Government collects money from you, it doesn't care, and that's why you have to demand a return on your investment because there's no interest rate there, right? So that's why they have to provide you services. Capitalism says, I build this water, I might make this for $1, but I'm going to sell it for $5, so I can make $4. But in that dollar, I don't want to pay a whole lot of people a whole lot of money. So the cheaper I can make it for $1, so all of that dollar, including wage and stuff, and then I can sell it for $5, that $4 is straight up profit. That's how capitalism works. And so we have to remember capitalism is about making sure that the inventor I think capitalism is a good thing because it pushed forward innovation, and also competition and choice, right? So to say that I wouldn't want capitalism would not be fair, right? But I also think the humanity part, so you don't have to make $4. You can actually make $2 and still be good, right? You ain't going to be any poorer if you're making $2 as a profit margin, and you're still making profit that can make you live great and wonderful. But for some reason, when people start getting richer, that's why trickle down has never worked. It's because as soon as they start making money, they want more. They don't want less. And so now I'm hearing this one lady comes on and she lives in Nebraska and she voted for Trump, and she said, I heard him. I was there. I went to the rallies, and we have, Hispanics that were on our farms that are not without papers, but I didn't think it was about me. Well, one day they woke up and the Hispanics that were doing the work didn't come back. So now their farm might be going belly up. Yeah.
And what they fail to realize is that immigrants are partially the reason that groceries were a lot cheaper, because they're willing to work for less than what most Americans are willing to work for.
Yes. Yeah.
So
but that's why capitalism requires almost slave labor, right? I'm not going to call it slavery, but it requires cheap labor. Cheap labor.
Cheap labor.
Yeah.
But most Americans are not willing to pick grapes off a field. So
nope.
But most immigrants will.
Yeah.
Like if you're deporting all the immigrants, they're legal or not, grocery prices are going to rise.
Yes. And for those who don't know, in Gwinnett County, because I moved here 25 years ago, when they were building almost all the subdivisions, and when I drove into my subdivision at the time, my house was not there, so it was from clay. There was clay dirt. And when they started building my house, 98% of the men building all of these subdivisions were Hispanic. Those extended stays were built for them, so they could live in them in Gwinnett County.
Right. And that's the thing, they don't understand, a lot of people don't understand economics and how this system works. And frankly, even for smart people, this is a complicated system. It's not easy to wrap your head around. But I think a lot of people were still fed nonsense like trickle-down theory. It's like the thing about, people that are scientists or in STEM like you and I is like, we need empirical evidence of things.
Empirical.
Otherwise,
don't come with me nonsense.
And there is no empirical evidence to suggest that trickle-down has worked. If anything, we've just seen a reduction in the last 40 years of real wages, purchasing power, affordability, asset prices are just...
all of that.
And the thing is, despite all this disconfirming evidence, people still believe in trickle-down. And people need to wake up. I think a lot of them need to, and start realizing that they were fed lies. I mean, the Republican Party talks about what the Democrats want as communism. We don't even close to resemble a communist country. We're advocating for social democracy.
They just throw roads isms, just
right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it works. This fear mongering about communism does work on a subset of the population, but they need to learn better and realize Europe is not a communist. Like
Neither's Canada.
right, and their new prime minister, and I'm forgetting his name, but he was saying that in Canada, you know, they have free markets, but but their healthcare, unlike America, which healthcare is a big business, he said it's not a big business here. It's a human right.
And if you look at groceries and packaging in Canada and some parts of Europe, if you look at the same product that's sold here in the US, the kind of fillers that are here, they don't have it in some of these markets. Because guess what? They're collectively in the business of making sure my neighbor is healthy too, because I'm paying for it.
Right.
So if you have if you're invested in making sure that your neighbor and your friends and your family are healthy, then guess what? It makes it easier. U.S. is got almost, I think it's 10 times the amount of population, or maybe 15 times the amount of population, maybe even 20, of Canada. Yet Canada has decided that they will provide health care for their entire nation. And a lot of Americans will say, well, you know, they can't sign certain doctors. Why? Because a lot of doctors get educated in Canada and come here because they can make a profit.
Right.
They take an Hippocratic oath to care first for the people that they're going to be healing and not to money. So it's a double-edged sword when you're trying to do right and somebody else is offering you something lucrative, right? It's really hard to say no to. But I hope that majority of Canadian doctors know that it's at the end of the day, they do make a good salary. They ain't poor, but they're not going to be millionaires for being doctors. And that's the difference. But I also believe, just like teaching and doctor, we should also pay them fair wages so that they can actually live in that way. Because a lot of times they go through school, their education bill is way higher than most people because of so many things, the residency and all of that stuff. So we need to remember that we're willing to pay somebody who dribble a ball or throw a ball hefty salaries, and it's for entertainment, and I don't have a problem if you're willing to pay your money to do it, but have the same kind of respect for people that are educating the entire population, or making sure you stay alive because you were brought into a hospital. I think we can have the same reverence and the same gumption about making sure that they are paid well.
I think so too. It doesn't have to be a compromise between, you know, a high-paying job, and people can realize at some point you're not going to be any happier making more money. At some point, all your basic needs are met, and you're able to save for your future and have children. But I think a lot of our billionaires and millionaires don't realize that, and they have a, you know, forever pursuit of more money.
Yeah.
And it's not making them any happier. It's just a game to them.
It is a game, and a game that we all can win. And in this life, there's always going to be people that are going to have more and people that are going to have less, because you do have to have a working class in order to do this. We sit in a building that is constructed by people that are willing to work with their hands. Everybody can't sit in the nice office and have the nice sweet hands, and there's got to be somebody out there willing to get callous. There's calluses. There's got to be people willing to go into a factory and day in and day out and assemble products, or put the raw materials to making the product, because if they don't, we won't have the things. This is an assembled product.
Right.
And people don't understand that it's not magic. Like one bishop said, Sunday morning I was in this car way back, and he says, this is not a Burger King religion. You can't have it your way. And so I remember that. And there's a couple of things that have stood out in my mind as the years have gone by. One thing that stood out years back was I had a Grand Am car, and I didn't realize it was my first car. I didn't realize I was supposed to change the fluid, so the engine blew. And so when the engine blew and the tow truck driver came, he said, ma'am, you've got an auto, but you got no mobility. And from that day on, there's nobody can impress me. I don't care if you're driving Bugatti, Range Rover. I don't care what you drive. If it isn't taking you from A to B, it's just an auto with no mobility.
Right.
So it don't matter to me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to realize sooner or later what life is really about, and it's not just about the forever accumulation of money. I could have chosen to be a school teacher, and I might do it one day, but the thing is, being an engineer pays more.
Of course. Same with me.
Right.
But eventually I got into this, and I'm doing engineering still, but I got into public service because it gives me the most energy. I feel great about it. Engineering is wonderful because I do think we contribute to making life easier for a lot of people. So no regrets about that. But there's something about being in service that makes you more fulfilled.
I agree. I mean, I did not ever expect to get into politics at all, but I do find that it is very fulfilling. In some ways, it's a calling. It's not made for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
Honestly, I felt the same way. I did not even see myself getting into politics like when I first started college. My original choice for a major was astronomy, but but I did not see myself going into politics despite how political I was in high school.
So you had a lot of opinions.
Yeah. That was most of what I talked about in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot, and I think a lot of people that do get into the political arena is because they have opinions about stuff. But I will say, please back up your opinions with some facts. It's good to speak passionately about stuff, but making general statements is usually not a good idea because you don't know what everybody's thinking. But also always check facts because we have to agree on a certain amount of facts. I can't understand people who think that science and STEM is, somehow dismissive when they pick up a phone or they turn on a TV or they live in a building. All of that requires engineering, science, math, calculation to make sure, especially when you see all these fancy designs of buildings and the different corners, that's all mathematical and geometry and all of that. All of that is somebody's doing it. So, and that requires facts, or else it will fall apart. If you do not do it right, it will fall apart. And so, when I look at stuff like this, I'm looking at people that think that they can just say anything they want at any time without any accountability. It's time for us to push back on that. I will never accept that. You can say that I think that I'm I'm better than you. I do not. But what I am will always be someone who checks my facts.
Right.
You are not going to tell me now. I had to sit in an organic class to make aspirin and nylon, and that has a actual process. You can't just make it and say, I want to make nylon. It doesn't happen like that. Right. You have to put the right things together in organic chemistry to get that done.
I agree. I mean, we need to be guided by facts. And I guess to sort of wrap this up, I believe that, the reality of the world as it is now, it could be better in many ways. And I have opinions. And the status quo is here, but I also think that we're never going to get better if we accept the status quo. And I'll let you wrap up because you have an opinion about the status quo. Yes,
I do. I think the status quo is not something that we should accept. If our ancestors accepted the status quo, we'd probably still be in caves. So, but status quo works for a certain time, but then things change. It changes. And as change happens, you have to move with it. You can't sit in the same place and expect a different result, or do things the same way and expect a different result. That's called madness. Right. But at the end of the day, my last slogan when I ran was for the status quo must go, because doing it, you don't ensure that, especially when you are in the business of serving others, to do the things the same way when you know that the needs are varying is wrong and harmful. Just because I speak English doesn't mean that if somebody doesn't speak English that they're dumb or something like that. We need to put the ability for them to be able to speak English and make it available, right? And maybe we can even learn how to speak another language, because we're such hard-headed as English speakers. We're the worst. We have the hardest time speaking another language. Yes.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't take away from you speaking English if you should learn another language. And if the person who doesn't speak English can learn English, it doesn't take away from them speaking their native tongue. It's just our ability to communicate with each other will be much, much better served. But at the end of the day, I don't do status quo. You know, you're usually put in a status quo situation, but then I would also recommend, don't go in there and say, I'm just changing because I'm new and I'm going to get this done. Know what you're changing before you change it, because if you change it,
That really helps.
it really is helpful if you know what you're going to change first before changing it. So I do recommend that anytime you go someplace or you're put at any table, don't sit there and accept what is already there. You can. That's why you were put at the table, to change up some things. But know what you're changing before you do it, because if you move a block in some places, everything could come crashing down.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure sitting down with you, Donna.
Thank you.
And we are certainly going to have you on again soon. But I guess the next episode will be with Representative Dewey McLean. And thank you. This was our very first episode, and we hope to see you tune in again.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.